Okay, so this is gonna be a bit of a rant, just a bit of a rant, but also kind of a chat, brain dumping video, as always. Hello, if you don't know me, my name is Chimso. This is Chimsology. Kind of rebranding a little bit. Typically, I've been recording for like a month, but I was using this place to kind of just talk about things that interest me, um, and anything that's on my mind that I want to talk about. So I was talking about a few different topics, but I think I want to make this channel kind of dedicated to primarily economics, and then everything else I was talking about kind of can go around economics. So I am an economics PhD student. I'm in my first year. It's actually my finals week, so the fact that I'm recording this video when I should be writing a paper right now, it's like it's on my chest. I want to get off. But economics PhD student, I'm hoping to do work in economic development, sustainability, empowerment on the African continent. But any ideas that I use towards that goal are universally applicable. And I think I want to make that transition on this channel. Sorry for you guys that don't know me, this is your first time watching this video or seeing me, but I want to make that transition on this channel. One, because it's literally what I'm studying. So I think it'll help me just to synthesize my thoughts around the whole thing a little bit better. But because it is what I am studying, it's one of the things that I feel like I can speak a bit more confidently on. Whereas some of the other things, science and metaphysics, Christian theology, and relationships, it's more so just my opinion. And although I do see myself as a very insightful person, and analytical, and I can speak on any of these things with the best of them, socially, I have the stamp of approval that says that I can speak on economics. However, and this is kind of the shift this channel can be making. While economics, business, and finance. So those three things, because economics, I'm currently studying it. I studied economics and finance in undergrad, and I know a lot about business because I am an entrepreneur. So I'm going to be circling around those three things. But the topic of this video is economics is political. And so you can't talk about economics without also talking about philosophy, without talking about sociology, without talking about relationships. And science and metaphysics is going to play into this, specifically when it comes to business, entrepreneurship, innovation, and extending what we in economics call the production possibilities frontier. Or basically, what are the things that we can actually do and create with the stuff that we have to make life better, for those living in our society. So the goal of this channel, like I always said, is using philosophy as a tool to enjoy life better for ourselves and to make life a little bit better for other people. And that is not going to change. That's just going to come into greater focus as we're talking about economics, because I genuinely believe economics is the tool, the primary tool for doing that. Is you make life better for yourself by having more economic opportunities. Life becomes better for other people when they have more economic opportunities. When people have better economic opportunities, it's a lot easier to think about philosophy, metaphysics, relationships, theology. But if somebody can't eat, if someone's health is not good, and they don't have any way to actually improve their health, like what are we talking about? What are we talking about? So yeah, I just wanted to come on here and do a little rant and chat. We'll see how long this goes. I tend to talk a lot. But if you can't tell, I'm very passionate about economics. I took my first econ class my freshman year of college, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And ever since, I've never stopped thinking about economics since that day. That was 5 years ago. Yeah, because I was a freshman in 2020 going into 2021, and I took my first econ class in the spring, so 2021. So 5 years ago, I have never stopped thinking about economics from that point. And then business and finance, because they are integral to economics. And I think specifically my economics, there is a field of economics or parts of economics that you can go into where you're not thinking about business and you're not thinking about finance. But when I'm thinking about the practical applications of economics, especially towards the goal of making life better for other people, you cannot do that without thinking about business and finance. It's just not possible. So, a little bit of an overview of what economics is. I have a video talking about, like a whole other video talking about it. I'm just going to give a bit of an overview now before I go into my rant. So, um, why am I blinking? Economics is the study of how people achieve the things that they want given the resources that are available to them. Point blank, period. And I think I explained this in another video, but let's say this is the thing that you are trying to achieve, or like there's multiple things. So there, just think of like 5 points on this line right here. This is where you are currently at and the things that you currently have available to you to get to that goal. So again, it could be like 5 different things. Economics studies how somebody gets from here to here. That is the field of economics. Studying that in between process. And in that sense, economics can be viewed as like a science and something that is what we in the field call positive. So positive is trying to make economics more like something like physics or like the hard sciences, just pure theory. We're just explaining how the world is. We are just making observations and things like that. Cool. In that sense, in terms of studying how somebody can get from one thing to another thing, like studying the in between, sure, we can say that that is objectively positive and scientific, and we are just making observations. However, I'm positing that economics is inherently political because the goals that people have are political. They are what we call in economics normative. So there's this whole discussion about normative versus positive economics, scientific versus political, essentially. And I'm using political very broadly, but somebody determines what the ends they are pursuing are. And also, the things that you have available to you are also political. Political in the sense of like political and philosophical. Let me say that. Um, PPE, politics, philosophy, and economics. But so, what somebody thinks that they have available to them is determined, like they have available to them to achieve a certain goal. Because you can have multiple things available to you, but you don't even realize that those things can be used to achieve a certain goal. I wish I had like a diagram. One of these videos, I will draw a diagram. But okay, what am I trying to explain? So let's think of let me try and think of a practical situation. Let's say somebody wants to get a certain job, right? Now the thing that what they think they have available to them to get a certain job is maybe the skills that they have, um, like whatever job boards that they can find, LinkedIn, Indeed, Google Jobs, Handshake, things like that. And like they think that they have to build a resume and they have to go through the process in order to like achieve getting this job. Okay. How do they know like what skills they have available to them? That typically comes within like social and communal contexts in which somebody would have pointed out that either they can learn these skills or that they can acquire them or that this is something that they're good at. And then also the idea that they have to go through this process in order to get a job. That's one person. Another person to get a job will call their uncle up and say that they need a job and then they'll get the job. Like that is inherently political and political in the sense of how human beings organize themselves, not in terms of like policies that come out of centralized bureaucratic democracies. Political in a more broad academic philosophical sense in terms of how human beings organize themselves within a collective. Inherently political because these two people have completely different access points into getting the same thing. And that determines the means that they have available to them in order to achieve a certain goal. In positive economics, people normally take those means and those ends as given and make a choice to not analyze them and to just take them as given and study the in between process. And I would even argue that the in between process of how you get from one place to another is also political, because you are deciding to make certain choices based on certain values that you have, based on certain worldviews that you have, based on how you see yourself in connection with other people and your environment, which is inherently political and philosophical. So I think the entire economic project is political, but you could argue a little bit better that if you set the means and you set the ends, if you set the means and you set the ends, that doing that in between process is more scientific than trying to analyze these. However, economics is not in academia, especially not in the past 100 years of the field. It has actually become a political tool. And I don't think we can necessarily separate ourselves from that reality. The reason why the rest of society knows what economics is because it's political. It's always going to be a political topic. It literally affects their everyday lives and how they move around in society. It is political. And I think economists that try and separate that reality are deluding themselves of the value of their work in society. I don't think they are aware of where they fit within the economic system and are lying to themselves. Yes, lying. Either lying to themselves or completely oblivious to what it is they are actually doing and where they actually fit within the system. Because people like politicians and business leaders are going to take the ideas that are coming out of the economic field to justify the decisions that they are making, to tell people, oh, yeah, we're making this decision and it's a valid decision because it's scientific and you can't argue with science. However, economics is not like hard sciences at all, because we are studying human beings and human society. You're studying human behavior. You're trying to understand why human beings do the things that they do. You're studying how human beings within a collective make decisions. That is political. At that point, it is no longer just scientific. It is now a political project, a political endeavor. Um, and also like the idea that like this is a quote from a really famous economist. His name is Friedrich Hayek. I think I've mentioned him in another video before. I didn't know there was a quote about this. I like these are thoughts that I had while I was in undergrad learning about economics. But he said an economist, I forget the exact quote, but an economist that is just an economist, um, or an economist can't just be an economist, something like that. But basically, as economics, we are not just doing one science or one type of study. We are incorporating multiple things into our study of human behavior in achieving ends given certain means. Economists make certain assumptions about human behavior and how people make decisions. And these assumptions were originally made in a time when the field of psychology was not a thing. So you made assumptions about human behavior, human values, human motivations based on like just general observation, but also the person that is making the assumption is themselves a human being that has certain values, has certain perspectives that informs how they think other people act, how they see other people act. And also they live within a certain time like time period and context that also informs that. Because I'm of the belief that if you live in a different society that has different values, you're going to come to a different anthropology. Anthropology meaning like an understanding of how human beings work, and things that they value, and things like that. And economics, historically, as a field, has developed within a very specific type of societal environment, which leads to a certain anthropology that underpins everything. Everything. Okay, so where was I going with that? So yeah, we make certain assumptions about human behavior that are context dependent, but also the assumptions about human behavior that were made, okay, context dependent, political. Okay. The assumptions about human behavior that were made before there was actually a field to just study human behavior, which is psychology. So now our assumptions need to be updated given what we actually see in psychology, which there are different fields of economics that try to do that. Experimental economics, behavioral economics, um, that try and bring insights from psychology into economics so that our models that we use to determine how somebody would go from here to here are actually accurate to how human beings work. So yeah, we do things like that, and I'm trying to think if there was something else. Took 10 minutes to explain economics, but I think even in that, I started like ranting a little bit about the fact that economics is inherently political because we're studying human beings, and human beings in and of themselves, once you put them with another human being, boom, politics emerges. Politics emerges. There is nothing in standard economics where there is one human being interacting on their own. Typically, when you're studying economics, that one human being exists within a context where they're interacting with other human beings, typically in the form of a market and transactions. Once you include another human being into the equation, boom, you have politics. You have politics because the dynamics of that interaction are set by certain social rules. And economists typically assume and imply and impose those social rules onto the agents. That's what we call the model human beings. They impose it onto the agents. But is it actually reflective, one, of the society that we live in? Two, is it reflective of the society that we live in because the society that has been built based on these assumptions that were made? Three, is it impossible that different social rules could exist and could actually be sustainable that would redefine those interactions? Because again, because we're studying human beings in social contexts, we barely any economist is thinking about like the economics of somebody living alone on an island trying to survive. Nobody is doing that. No one is doing that. You could do that. No one is doing that. Okay. So because all economics, even microeconomics, when an individual is making a like decision, requires another human being to interact with to make that decision, it's political. And okay, now I'm gonna finally get to my notes. 17 minutes in. I touched most of these, um, honestly. But because of that, I think it is important for us to understand the social context in which these decisions are being made. Again, the social context that determines what means somebody's aware that they have available to them to achieve certain ends. What determines the ends that people are um, trying to achieve, and what they think are the best ways, like the best routes to take. Because if you go from one point to another, there's infinite amount of routes that you could take to go from here to here. Just there's so many different, yeah, there are so many different things that you could do to get there. And typically, economists will say, "Oh, people will just take the most efficient route." But efficiency requires constraints, and determining what your constraints are one, philosophical on the part of the person making the decision, but political based on the context in which external constraints are imposed upon somebody. And I think, like, for the social use of economics, I think economists need to be more aware of the fact that they actually get to set the objectives that they use economics as a tool to achieve. So, how did this whole rant start? 20 minutes. One of these days, I will learn to be brief and concise. One of these days. Or maybe I should just accept that this is just going to be like podcast format. But, okay, what was I saying? So the video, I watched a couple videos yesterday, but I'm like brushing up on some like calculus topics for my program, and I just got really interested in understanding like the use of the calculus, some of the calculus that I was learning, and like the different ways in which it is used, and then also like different approaches to economics that would probably favor one use over another, especially given the type of economics that I'm currently learning and being taught. And I this is not the first time I came across it, but I think this is the first time I started taking it seriously. the idea of complexity economics as being probably the most integrated form of economics that there is, and probably the one that I am most aligned with, because it sees the economy as a complex composite of human beings, institutions, and the interactions of all of them. So I started like just deep diving research. I was supposed to be preparing for exams. I was deep diving research. It's okay. Next year I will be free to do all the deep dives that I want and say that I'm doing work. Um, but yeah, I was doing deep diving research on it, and I came across just like a couple videos that were really interesting. People talking about complexity economics, but the one that made me want to record this video was New Economic Paradigm from Institution of New Economic Thinking at Oxford. So it was these two guys that kind of like spearheaded it, and they're talking about it, and they're talking about like the name that they have for it is market humanism. And I think it's really the reason why it got me riled up is because it was reminding me of a lot of the things that I was thinking about in undergrad when I was learning economics, and it was becoming something that's like really interesting topic and core just thought process of mine. But we really, sorry, I just saw like a really tiny car just drive, which was so interesting. But we really do have the freedom to set the objectives that we are trying to pursue when we are doing economics. And I don't know if there's a better way for me to explain this, but like, yeah, is there a better way for me to explain this? We get to set the objectives. I didn't prepare for this video. I literally stopped watching. I like finished the video, came up here, and just started recording. So this is literally just like stream of consciousness. I didn't prepare concretely to necessarily talk about this, but I think okay. So the idea that policymakers and business owners use like economic research and economic ideas for whatever means they want, I think should be very indicative to economists that one, you are a tool. What kind of tool do you want to be? This is one thing my micro teacher last semester, I think I mentioned him in another video, but this is one thing he said all the time. What kind of economist do you want to be? I think people like to assume that they're individuals and they get to make their own choices and their own objectives for the things that they do. You exist in social context and in the system. You are a tool for somebody else. Economists are tools for other people. And while the joy of many economists is literally just having a space to do academic inquiry, whether that's philosophical or mathematical, they just like to have a space where they can use their analytical brain all the time. And they're not necessarily concerned about how their analysis is being used in society. I think that's something that we do need to be more conscious of is who is the type of person that is likely to take what it is that I'm saying and use it for their ends, and what kind of ends would somebody typically take my analysis and use it for? Do I want to be connected to that? Let's ask ourselves these questions. What kind of tool do you want to be? And that's not just for economists. I think that's just for people in general. Like when you're going to a job, then you're a tool. You're a tool wherever you go. At work, you're a tool. In relationships, you can be a tool. Like anything you do. When you go out and buy something, you are a tool. You are fulfilling being in a society means that inherently you are there to fulfill part of your reason of being there is to fulfill the desires and needs of other people. Are you being active about what kind of desires you're fulfilling, or are you just falling into the stream of whatever somebody else wants and literally being a tool? There's a difference between being a collaborator and being a tool, and I think most of us are tools. We don't realize somebody is using us for their own ends because we have been convinced to think that them using us is actually for our own good. please free yourself. I can talk about that in another video. um, but yeah, so like we get to determine our own ends. Like we can determine if, because like we're in a society and economics is, honestly, I would probably say like, I don't know if I would go as far to say primary, because politics, but I don't think economics is definitely not separate from politics. There may be politics that are separate from economics, but economics is not separate from politics. And because of that, like economics falls within the political zeitgeist of any society. So, do we want to be tools toward the ends of individualistic, separatists societies where people are genuinely only concerned about themselves and maybe their immediate circle because they have to be in order to care about themselves? Or do we want to be tools toward the ends of creating a more collaborative society where we actually respect other human beings, not just the ones that can give us something or the ones that we immediately see, but understanding that we exist within a larger collective called a society? And I would even extend it to the globe, that the actions that I do affect somebody else that I may never see. Do we have, like, because like economics can explain decision making within that context. So then it's also the question of the economics of the economic field. Like, what ends is the economic field being geared towards? Because it could be different. It could be different than what it currently is. And where it's going creates very different societies and very different situations for people. Political. Um, there's so many other things. I kind of touched on these, but I don't think I'm gonna get to all of them. So maybe another video. I was just like introducing this thought. Um, but I think also because, like I said, politicians and business owners typically are the two biggest forces using economics, and they are the powers that be in this world. Like, Jesus, economics is like such a, yeah, it's such a powerful tool to shape the world into how you want it to be, especially for people that have the power. And I think when we as economists realize that, I think we would be a lot more careful in how we are making decisions about how we go about economics and the things that we prioritize when we're studying economics. I think it's very similar to people that are developing AI and artificial intelligence, or people that are just making advancements in certain realms of science, like biotechnology, AI, and things like that, because they realize that it's not just scientific pursuit, intellectual stimulation. They realize that what they are making is going to have massive impacts on society currently and into the future and the trajectory that we take. And because they are aware of that, they're very conscious about how they go about doing the things that they're doing. I think economics should be at the top, like the absolute top, like of people that are doing that, because it sets the stage for everything else to happen. Literally, it sets the stage for everything else to happen. And I just don't think we think about that enough. I don't think we do, and I think we need to, because the implications are ridiculous. I mean, we're already living in a lot of the implications. We being as a society, economists as individuals typically are not experiencing the implications of the applications of their theories because they exist in the upper level, the upper echelon of society. Like they are the elites. They are. So they are the elites in terms of they typically exist within the upper middle class, like um, income bracket. They are the elites in terms of receiving something like the highest forms of education. They are the elites in terms of being in a position to have massive impacts on society. So when they are making certain claims and using certain methods, most of them don't even have the context to think about poor people, people with no power, people with little social access and like social capital and mobility and political power. Because they typically exist at that upper level of society, the things they are thinking about are limited to the experiences that they've had and the people that they have encountered, which deeply affects the economics that they do. You too are a socially embedded person, and that affects how you go about the field, the practice, the project that you are doing. And I would just like I would like economists to be more aware of that. I think the same way that like in certain business schools, business people have to like they have to take an ethics class. I even think like in engineering, there's like an engineering ethics that you have to take. I think economists should be forced to take an ethics class and to take a political philosophy class and understand its connection to what it is that they are doing. Um, yeah. And yeah, I think the other things I can maybe come back to in another video because this one is already past 30 minutes. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about like the state of our society and what kind of society we would ideally like to live in. And not remember how I said like the other topics will circle around economics because economics literally touches everything. But that would touch on like the relationships ideal. Um, because economic decisions are always human interactions between one human being and another. And the social contract that we have with another human being determines how those interactions are made. So I would like to talk a little bit more about what kind of societies that we would like to live in, what kind of human interactions we would like to have when we're facing different like economic decisions and economic situations. And just kind of how my sentiments towards this whole thing have changed over the past 5 years since the first time I took an economics class. Um, yeah, another video. Maybe after my exams are done. I will have so much more freedom in the next 5 days. But anyways, thanks for listening to me rant about literally. I'm not gonna say nothing. I'm not gonna trivialize the topic that I was talking about because it's actually very important. But thanks for listening to me ramble for 33 minutes. If you stayed this long. Until the next one. Thanks for stopping.